Is he pretending to be Jesus himself, or just an actor flaunting that cross to get attention? The sharp, biting voice of lead flight attendant Claire Thompson sliced through the luxurious first-class cabin of the American Airlines flight, drawing every eye to Jonathan Roumie. He sat there, a worn Bible in hand, a simple wooden cross hanging from a leather cord around his neck, catching the cabin's soft light. His calm, piercing gaze met Claire's contemptuous stare, as if he were ready for a battle no one saw coming. Her venomous accusation hung in the air, and a secret yet to be revealed would soon force the entire cabin to confront their own prejudices. Flight AA-247 from Los Angeles to New York was preparing for takeoff. The first-class cabin was a haven of luxury plush leather seats, soft ambient lighting, and glasses of wine served by attendants with polished smiles. Passengers boarded with designer luggage, chatting animatedly about business deals, lavish vacations, or upcoming events. Among them, Jonathan Roumie stepped aboard, unassuming in a navy blazer, black slacks, and carrying a small duffel bag. In his hand was a tattered Bible, a gift from his late Lebanese grandmother. Around his neck hung a simple wooden cross, hand-carved by her when he was a child, a cherished symbol of his faith and family. He quietly made his way to seat 2A, a first-class window seat, and settled in. His eyes focused on the pages of his Bible, seeking solace amidst the opulence. Jonathan was no stranger to curious or judgmental stares. As the actor who portrayed Jesus in The Chosen, he was used to being recognized, sometimes admired, but often criticized. Today, he was headed to New York for a charity event, a cause close to his heart to support underprivileged children. Unbeknownst to him, his first-class seat and the wooden cross around his neck would ignite a confrontation that would spark emotions and challenge biases across the cabin. Claire Thompson, the lead flight attendant, stood at the entrance of the first-class cabin, impeccable in her Navy uniform. Her smile was radiant for other passengers, but when her eyes landed on Jonathan, it turned cold and hostile. Claire was an avid detractor of Jonathan. She had watched The Chosen and followed online debates where some labeled him a hypocrite for leveraging Jesus' image to build fame. She was particularly irked by his interviews, where he spoke of his Catholic faith with a sincerity she dismissed as performative. Seeing him in first class, with the wooden cross prominently displayed, Claire saw her chance to expose him. A fraud, flaunting his faith in first class, she thought, her lips curling into a sneer. In the cabin, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, an elderly couple, sat in the row behind Jonathan. Mrs. Peterson was knitting, while Mr. Peterson flipped through a business newspaper, occasionally glancing around with curiosity. Claire approached them, her smile brightening. "Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson. It's a pleasure to serve you today," she said, her voice dripping with warmth. Mrs. Peterson smiled back, and Mr. Peterson nodded approvingly as Claire delivered a coffee. Jonathan noticed the stark contrast in her demeanor but remained composed, his eyes returning to his Bible. Claire moved through the rows, checking passengers and luggage. As she passed Jonathan, she paused deliberately, her gaze fixed on the wooden cross around his neck. Without a word, she pursed her lips, as if his presence was an affront. Nearby, Ellen Harper, a middle-aged woman with meticulously styled hair, whispered to her companion, "Does he think he's a saint? Wearing that cross in first class? Probably just looking for attention." Jonathan overheard but didn't react, quietly turning a page in his Bible, his focus unwavering, with the confidence of someone in control. Claire returned and stopped at Jonathan's seat. "Sir," she said, her voice polite but laced with sarcasm, "I need you to tuck that cross away or move to economy. First class isn't the place for flaunting fake faith. Her words sent a ripple of tension through the cabin. Heads turned, and whispers began. Ellen leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with curiosity and amusement. "You played Jesus on TV?" Claire continued, her tone biting. "But that doesn't mean you belong here, parading around like some holy figure." Jonathan looked up, his eyes calm but sharp. "This cross isn't for show," he said, his voice low and steady. "It's a gift from my grandmother, part of who I am, and I believe this is my seat. You can check the passenger list." Claire raised an eyebrow, her irritation evident. "I don't need to check," she snapped. "I know who belongs here and who doesn't. You're not fooling me with your man of faith act." The cabin grew heavier with tension. Ellen let out a soft chuckle, whispering to her companion, "What a hypocrite, playing the saint for fame." But Tyler Brooks, a young businessman seated across from Jonathan, frowned at Claire's tone, his eyes shifting between her and Jonathan, trying to make sense of the situation. Claire crossed her arms, blocking the aisle. "If you don't tuck that cross away or move to economy, I'll call security," she declared, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. Jonathan tilted his head slightly, his composure unshaken. "Do what you feel is necessary," he replied, his voice even but carrying an undeniable strength. Ellen whispered louder, "He's just trying to make a scene." Tyler, however, grew visibly uneasy, his gaze fixed on Claire, as if debating whether to speak up. Faced with defiance in front of passengers, Claire turned to Sarah, a younger flight attendant nearby. "Sarah, escort this man to economy," she ordered, her voice cutting like a blade. Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting to Jonathan, then to the passenger list in her hand. She wanted to suggest checking it, but Claire's piercing glare silenced her. Sarah stepped forward, her voice soft. "Sir, please." But Jonathan only smiled gently and shook his head. "You might want to check the list first," he said, his tone kind but firm. "It'll be better for everyone." Claire scoffed, dismissing him. "I know what I'm doing," she said, her voice brimming with confidence. "You don't belong here, and I won't let you disrupt this flight." The cabin's atmosphere grew thick, passengers whispering among themselves. One muttered, "Why doesn't he just hide the cross and be done with it?" Another shrugged, "Maybe he's looking for drama." But Jonathan ignored the murmurs, his hand resting on his Bible, his eyes steady, as if seeing through the chaos. Sarah, still hesitant, moved toward the passenger list near the galley. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages, hoping to find something to defuse the situation. But before she could speak, Claire snapped, "Sarah, leave it. I'm handling this." Sarah flushed, stepping back, her eyes apologetic as they met Jonathan's. Meanwhile, Tyler could no longer stay silent. He leaned toward Jonathan, his voice low. "Is everything okay? Do you need any help?" Jonathan turned, offering a warm smile. "Thank you. I'm fine," he said, his voice tinged with gratitude. Claire, noticing Tyler's interference, spun around. "Sir," she said sharply to Tyler, "please don't encourage this disruption." Then she pointed at Jonathan. "You're wasting everyone's time. Tuck that cross away and move." Jonathan met her gaze, his voice still calm but carrying a new strength. "You're quick to judge," he said, "but maybe you should pause and think. This cross isn't about causing trouble. It's a symbol of what I believe. No one should be forced to hide their faith." Jonathan's words landed like a quiet thunderclap, making Claire pause. She sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, really? Are you going to lecture me on morality? Mr. TV Jesus, You're just an actor. Stop pretending to be a hero of faith. Her words silenced the cabin, passengers gaping in shock. Ellen whispered loudly, "What a hypocrite, playing the saint for fame." But Tyler, now standing, glared at Claire. "You're crossing a line," he said, his voice low but firm. Claire, publicly challenged, felt her anger surge. She stepped closer to Jonathan, her voice trembling with fury. "I've seen your interviews. All that empty talk about faith. You think you can fool people with that cross. But not me." She pointed toward the aisle. "Hide it, or get off this plane." The cabin felt frozen, every eye on Jonathan. Jonathan, still seated, slowly closed his Bible. He looked at Claire, his gaze unwavering. "This cross was carved by my grandmother," he said, his voice clear and steady. "It reminds me of love and sacrifice, not fame. If you want the truth, you'll see it soon enough." He paused, his eyes sweeping the cabin, as if addressing everyone. Faith isn't something to argue over. It's something to live. Claire, momentarily thrown by Jonathan's words, felt a flicker of unease, but she quickly regained her composure, her tone mocking. "The truth. The truth is you're causing a scene in first class, and I won't allow it." She turned to Sarah, barking, "Call security." Now Sarah hesitated, her eyes pleading with Jonathan, as if urging him to act before things escalated further. But Jonathan remained unruffled. He reached into his blazer pocket, pulling out his phone, his fingers brushing the screen lightly. "Are you sure you want to escalate this?" he asked, his voice soft but weighty, making Claire falter. She laughed derisively, though her eyes betrayed a hint of doubt. "Threatening me, I'm not scared," she shot back, her voice less certain. The cabin's tension was palpable, like a taut string ready to snap. Ellen whispered to her companion, "He's about to get kicked off." But Tyler, his eyes full of trust, leaned toward Jonathan. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm with you," he said quietly. Jonathan smiled, his gaze warm. "Thank you," he replied. "But this isn't about me. It's about something bigger." As Claire returned with a security officer, the cabin held its breath. She pointed at Jonathan, her voice shaking with anger. "Get him out of here." But Jonathan sat still, his eyes locked on Claire, as if waiting for a moment no one in the cabin could foresee. Something was coming, and it would change everything. As the security officer stepped into the first-class cabin, the air seemed to freeze. Claire, her eyes blazing with anger, pointed at Jonathan Roumie. "He's causing a disturbance," she declared, her voice echoing. But Jonathan remained seated, his gaze steady, his hand resting lightly on his worn Bible. "I'm not causing trouble," he said, his tone calm but resolute. "I'm only asking to be treated with the same respect as any other passenger." His words landed like a stone in still water, stirring whispers among the passengers, and a new twist emerged as Sarah, the young flight attendant, stepped forward, shifting the entire dynamic. Sarah, clutching the passenger list tightly, moved closer, her eyes filled with determination. "Ms. Claire," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I checked the manifest. Mr. Roumie is listed for seat 2A in first class, with a special note from management." Claire spun around, her eyes flashing. "What are you doing?" "Sarah," she snapped, but her confidence began to waver. Sarah, despite her nerves, pressed on. "The note says he's a VIP guest, booked by a partner of the airline." The revelation silenced the cabin. A few passengers gasped, while Ellen Harper, who had mocked Jonathan earlier, looked down, her eyes avoiding contact. The security officer, a tall man named Mark, glanced at Claire with confusion. "If his ticket is valid, I don't see an issue here," he said, his voice firm yet measured. Claire opened her mouth to protest, but Mark's steady gaze stopped her. She turned back to Jonathan, her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and fury. "Then why is he flaunting that cross?" she muttered, her earlier arrogance fading. Jonathan met her eyes, his voice gentle but unwavering. "You don't have to agree with my beliefs," he said, "but you don't get to decide I should hide them. Respect isn't something we demand from others, it's something we give." His words rang like a quiet lesson, not just for Claire, but for every passenger listening intently. Tyler Brooks, the young businessman across the aisle, nodded in agreement, his eyes bright with admiration. Claire, however, wasn't ready to back down. She stepped closer, her voice low but sharp. "You think you can sit here and preach to me? I've seen people like you, using faith to mask your hypocrisy." Her accusation reignited the tension. But before Jonathan could respond, another voice cut through. "You're going too far. It was Mrs. Peterson, the elderly woman knitting earlier, now standing, her eyes stern. I've flown for decades and never seen a flight attendant treat a passenger like this. He's done nothing wrong." Mrs. Peterson's unexpected intervention made Claire step back, her face paling. Other passengers began to murmur, some nodding in support, others whispering agreement. Ellen, who had been quick to judge Jonathan, stayed silent, her eyes downcast, as if grappling with her own shame. Sarah seized the moment, stepping forward to hand the passenger list to Mark. "Here," she said, pointing to Jonathan's name. Mark reviewed it, then nodded at Claire. "Everything checks out. I suggest we move on and let this flight proceed." Claire, now cornered, clenched her fists, her eyes flickering between anger and unease. She turned and strode toward the galley, avoiding the passengers' gazes. Jonathan watched her go, his expression not one of triumph, but of quiet compassion. He opened his Bible again, flipping to a marked page, as if seeking solace in familiar words. Tyler leaned toward him, his voice low. "You handled that incredibly well," he said. Not everyone could stay that calm. Jonathan smiled, his eyes warm. "Thank you," he said. "But sometimes staying calm isn't about being strong, it's about knowing I'm not alone." His words carried a deeper meaning, making Tyler nod thoughtfully, as if pondering something profound. The cabin settled into an uneasy calm, but a lingering tension remained. Passengers returned to their routines, yet their occasional glances at Jonathan suggested they were still processing what they'd witnessed. In the galley, Claire stood alone, gripping the counter, her eyes distant. Sarah, after serving drinks, approached quietly. "Claire, are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Claire didn't answer immediately, only shaking her head, her lips tight. "I was just doing my job," she finally said, her voice hoarse. "But he made me feel like I was completely wrong." Sarah placed a hand on Claire's shoulder, her eyes gentle. "Maybe he's not wrong," she said softly. "Maybe he's just living what he believes." Sarah's words made Claire pause, but she quickly turned away, as if unwilling to face the truth. In the cabin, the plane began to taxi, the engines humming as takeoff loomed, but just as things seemed to stabilize, another passenger, a middle-aged man named Richard seated near Ellen, spoke up loudly. "I know him," he said, his eyes on Jonathan. "He's that actor from The Chosen. But I read online that people say he's just using faith to make money and get famous. Is that true?" Richard's words were like fuel on a smoldering fire, reigniting whispers in the cabin. Ellen, who had been silent, now looked at Jonathan with renewed suspicion. Some passengers pulled out their phones, as if to check the claims. Claire, overhearing from the galley, stepped back into the aisle, her eyes gleaming as if she'd found a new angle to regain control. "See?" she said, pointing at Jonathan. "I'm not the only one who thinks he's a hypocrite." Jonathan, unfazed, met Richard's gaze, then Claire's. "I'm not here to dispute what others think of me," he said, his voice clear and strong. "But if you want the truth, ask me directly instead of believing what's on social media." His words made Richard falter, his eyes wavering, as if caught off guard by Jonathan's sincerity. Claire, however, wasn't ready to let go. "Then tell us," she challenged, her voice sharp. "How do you live that justifies sitting here, wearing that cross, claiming to be a man of faith?" Her question cut through the cabin like a blade, every passenger waiting for Jonathan's response. He took a deep breath, his eyes briefly resting on the wooden cross around his neck, as if drawing strength from his grandmother's memory. "I don't claim to be perfect," he began, his voice steady and earnest. "I live simply in a small apartment, driving an old car, trying every day to live true to what I believe. This cross isn't about fame. It reminds me that love and sacrifice are greater than any spotlight." His words shifted the cabin's atmosphere. Mrs. Peterson nodded, her eyes bright with respect. Tyler smiled, clearly moved by Jonathan's authenticity. Even some passengers who had whispered doubts now seemed to reconsider. But Claire, though shaken, refused to yield. "Then why are you in first class?" she pressed, her voice thick with skepticism. "If you're so simple, why choose this luxury?" Jonathan smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving Claire's. "Sometimes what we see isn't the whole story," he said, his voice carrying a mysterious weight. "But if you want to know, I'm happy to share at the right time." He paused, his gaze sweeping the cabin, as if inviting everyone to reflect. Claire, caught off guard by his response, felt a flicker of unease. She turned away, but her earlier confidence had visibly waned. As the plane took off, the engines roaring, the first-class cabin settled into a temporary quiet, yet the passengers' glances at Jonathan, Claire, and the wooden cross suggested the story was far from over. Something bigger was brewing, ready to erupt, and it would force everyone to confront the truth not just about Jonathan, but about themselves. The plane soared above the clouds, the hum of the engines a steady backdrop to the lingering tension in the first-class cabin. Claire Thompson retreated to the galley, her face a mask of frustration, but her resolve unbroken. Jonathan Roumie sat calmly in seat 2A, his worn Bible closed on his lap, the wooden cross around his neck catching the cabin's soft light. The passengers, still buzzing from the earlier confrontation, exchanged glances, their whispers growing louder as a new voice emerged. A young woman, barely out of her teens, stood up, her eyes wide with recognition. "You're Jonathan Roumie, from The Chosen!" she exclaimed, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Claire's head snapped up from the galley, sensing an opportunity, and a new storm began to brew, one that would test the power of truth itself. The young woman, Lily Carter, clutched her phone, her face lit with excitement. "My family watches your show every week," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's changed our lives. You're not a hypocrite, you're the real deal." Her words, filled with sincerity, shifted the cabin's atmosphere. Mrs. Peterson smiled warmly, nodding in approval, while Tyler Brooks gave a subtle thumbs up. Even Ellen Harper, who had earlier mocked Jonathan, seemed to waver, her expression softening, but Claire, overhearing from the galley, saw Lily's support as a challenge to her narrative. She stepped back into the aisle, her eyes narrowing. "Real deal," she scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "He's just an actor who knows how to play the part." Jonathan looked at Lily, his smile gentle but genuine. "Thank you for that," he said softly. "It means a lot to hear how the show's touched you." He turned to Claire, his gaze steady. "As for why I'm in first class, since you asked, I didn't choose this seat. It was a gift from a friend, Michael Carter, a supporter of The Chosen and a partner of this airline. He insisted I take it for this trip. The revelation landed like a quiet bombshell. Passengers exchanged surprised looks, and Sarah, the younger flight attendant, nodded subtly, confirming the note she'd seen on the passenger list. Claire's face flushed, her earlier confidence crumbling. "That doesn't change anything," she snapped, though her voice lacked its former bite. "You're still using that cross and your so-called faith to get attention." Her accusation felt desperate, and the cabin's mood shifted further against her. "Mr. Peterson lowered his newspaper, his eyes sharp. "Enough," he said firmly. "You've been proven wrong about his seat, and now you're just grasping at straws." His words, delivered with the authority of age, silenced Claire momentarily. She clenched her jaw, retreating to the galley once more, but her fingers were already on her phone, typing furiously. Unbeknownst to the cabin, Claire was tapping into the plane's Wi-Fi, her anger fueling a reckless decision. She opened her social media app and began drafting a post called "A Holy Actor Flaunting His Fake Faith in First Class. Hypocrisy at 30,000 feet. The Chosen Fraud." She hesitated for a moment, her thumb hovering over the post button. But her pride won out. She hit send, unaware of the ripple effect her words would unleash. Within minutes, notifications flooded her screen as the post gained traction, shared by others who thrived on online outrage. The hashtag began to trend, and the cabin remained oblivious to the storm brewing online. Lily, still standing, turned to the other passengers, her voice passionate. "I don't care what anyone says online," she declared. "I've seen how The Chosen shows Jesus love, and this man lives it. You can't fake that." Her boldness drew nods from several passengers, including Tyler, who clapped softly. "Well said," he murmured. Even Richard, the man who had earlier questioned Jonathan's motives, looked uncomfortable, his earlier bravado fading. He glanced at his phone, scrolling through social media, and his eyes widened as he saw Claire's post gaining momentum. You might want to check this," he said, holding up his screen to show Jonathan the trending hashtag. Jonathan glanced at the post, his expression unreadable. He took a deep breath, his eyes briefly resting on the wooden cross around his neck. "I've seen things like this before," he said calmly, addressing Richard and the nearby passengers. "People can say what they want online, but the truth doesn't change because of a hashtag." His words carried a quiet strength, and Lily's eyes shone with admiration. "You're amazing," she said, almost to herself, before sitting down, still clutching her phone as if ready to defend him online. Claire, now back in the galley, overheard the exchange and felt a surge of defiance. She stepped out, her phone still in hand, and addressed the cabin with a forced smile. "Looks like I'm not the only one who sees through him," she said, holding up her phone to show the growing number of likes on her post. "The internet agrees he's just an actor playing a saint." Her words were meant to wound, but they fell flat as passengers began to murmur in disapproval. "Mrs. Peterson shook her head, her knitting needles still in her hands. "You're digging your own grave," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made Claire flinch. Sarah, watching from the side, felt a pang of unease. She approached Claire in the galley, her voice low but urgent. "Claire, "You need to stop this," she said. "That post is unfair, and it's not helping anyone." Claire's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm just telling the truth," she snapped, but her voice betrayed a hint of doubt. Sarah shook her head. "You're letting personal feelings cloud your judgment. You saw the manifest. He's here legitimately. And that cross, it's not hurting anyone." Claire turned away, her hands trembling as she gripped her phone, the notifications piling up. In the cabin, Tyler leaned toward Jonathan again, his voice low. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "That post could cause a lot of trouble. Do you want me to say something online to set the record straight?" Jonathan shook his head, his smile faint but appreciative. "Thank you, but no," he said. "The truth has a way of coming out on its own. I'd rather focus on what I can control, living with integrity." Tyler nodded, impressed by Jonathan's resolve, but his eyes darted to his own phone, where he saw the hashtag spreading further. As the flight continued, the cabin settled into an uneasy rhythm. Passengers returned to their books, laptops, or in-flight entertainment, but the undercurrent of tension remained. Lily, still buzzing with excitement, typed furiously on her phone, posting a heartfelt defense of Jonathan met Jonathan Roumie on a flight today. "He's as kind and real as he seems. Don't believe the lies. The chosen truth." Her post began to gain traction, sparking a counter-narrative online, though Claire's accusations still dominated. Jonathan, meanwhile, opened his Bible again, his eyes scanning a familiar passage. He didn't check his phone or engage with the online drama, but his calm demeanor spoke volumes. Mrs. Peterson, watching him, leaned forward slightly. "You remind me of my son," she said softly. "He faced a lot of criticism for his beliefs, but he never backed down." "You're doing the right thing." Jonathan looked up, touched by her words. "That means a lot," he said. "Sometimes, standing firm isn't about winning. It's about showing what's possible." Claire, in the galley, scrolled through the responses to her post, her face a mix of defiance and unease. The likes and shares were piling up, but so were comments calling her out for her behavior. One passenger, unnoticed by Claire, had recorded part of the earlier confrontation and was now debating whether to post it online. The video, if shared, could shift the narrative entirely, but for now, it remained on their phone, a silent threat to Claire's campaign. As the plane cruised toward New York, Jonathan received a text from Michael Carter, the friend who had booked his ticket. "Heard there's some trouble on your flight." The message read, "Let me know if you need me to step in." Jonathan smiled faintly, typing a quick reply. "Thanks, Michael. I'm okay. Just letting the truth do its work." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his eyes returning to his Bible. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the flight attendants prepared for the next service. Claire emerged from the galley, her professional mask back in place, but her eyes avoided Jonathan's. Sarah, moving through the cabin with trays of food, gave Jonathan a small, apologetic smile as she passed. The passengers, though focused on their meals, continued to steal glances at Jonathan, Claire, and the young fan, Lily, who was still typing furiously on her phone. Richard, the man who had sparked the latest wave of doubt, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He looked at Jonathan, then back at his phone, where Claire's post continued to spread. "Maybe I was wrong," he muttered to himself, his fingers hovering over the screen as if considering a response. Ellen, sitting nearby, remained silent, her earlier smugness replaced by a thoughtful expression. As the plane descended through the clouds, the tension in the cabin was far from resolved. Claire's post was gaining momentum online, and Lily's defense was starting to rally support. Jonathan, at the center of it all, remained a pillar of calm, his faith unshaken. But the storm was far from over. and something bigger was on the horizon, waiting to erupt and challenge everyone aboard to face the truth not just about Jonathan, but about themselves. The plane cruised steadily at 30,000 feet, the hum of the engines a constant undercurrent to the charged atmosphere in the first-class cabin. Claire Thompson's social media post, accusing Jonathan Roumie of hypocrisy, was spreading like wildfire online, each notification on her phone fueling her fleeting sense of vindication. Jonathan sat calmly in seat 2A, his worn Bible resting on his lap, the wooden cross around his neck a quiet testament to his unshaken faith. The passengers, now aware of the online storm, exchanged uneasy glances, their phones lighting up with the trending hashtag, "The Chosen Fraud." But as whispers turned to murmurs, Tyler Brooks and Mrs. Peterson stepped up to defend Jonathan, while Sarah, the young flight attendant, took a bold step that could shift the entire narrative. Claire, stationed in the galley, scrolled through her phone, her lips curling as she saw the growing number of likes and retweets. The post had taken on a life of its own, with strangers piling on, accusing Jonathan of exploiting faith for fame. Yet, cracks in her confidence began to show as she noticed comments defending him, many citing Lily's passionate counterpost. She gripped her phone tighter, her knuckles whitening, unwilling to admit she might have misjudged. In the cabin, Ellen Harper, who had earlier mocked Jonathan, scrolled through the same hashtag, her brow furrowing. The vitriol online contrasted sharply with the calm man sitting a few rows away, and she began to question her initial judgment. Tyler Brooks, the young businessman, leaned across the aisle toward Jonathan, his voice low but urgent. "This is getting out of control," he said, showing Jonathan his phone screen, where Claire's post now had thousands of shares. "People are tearing you apart online. We need to do something." Jonathan glanced at the screen, his expression serene yet thoughtful. "I appreciate your concern," he said, his voice steady. "But I've learned that responding to hate with more noise rarely changes hearts. The truth will speak for itself." Tyler shook his head, impressed, but frustrated. "You're too calm for your own good," he said, half smiling. "But I'm not letting this slide." Mrs. Peterson, overhearing, set her knitting aside and leaned forward. "He's right. Young man," she said to Jonathan, her voice firm but kind. "You don't deserve this. That flight attendant's behavior is disgraceful, and now she's dragging your name through the mud online." Her eyes, sharp with the wisdom of age, turned toward the galley, where Claire was still engrossed in her phone. "Someone needs to hold her accountable." Jonathan met her gaze, his smile gentle. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson," he said, "but accountability starts with us choosing to act with grace, even when it's hard." In the galley, Sarah moved quietly, her heart racing. She had seen Claire's post and the chaos it was causing online. As she prepared a tray of drinks, she made a decision, slipping her phone from her pocket. She sent a discreet message to the airline's crew supervisor via the internal messaging system. "Lead flight attendant Claire Thompson has posted unprofessional content online targeting a passenger. Please advise." Her fingers trembled as she hit send, knowing the risk she was taking by reporting her superior. She glanced at Claire, who was oblivious, still scrolling through her phone, a faint smirk on her face as she read the latest comments. Back in the cabin, Richard, the passenger who had sparked doubt with his earlier remarks, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He kept refreshing his phone, watching the online debate unfold. Lily's post, defending Jonathan with "Bektak, the chosen truth," was gaining traction. And comments from fans of The Chosen were pouring in, praising his authenticity. Richard's eyes darted to Jonathan, who sat reading his Bible, seemingly untouched by the chaos. "Maybe I jumped the gun," Richard muttered to himself, his fingers hovering over his phone as if considering a retraction. Ellen, sitting nearby, noticed his unease and leaned over. "You think you were wrong about him?" she asked quietly, her tone no longer mocking but curious. Richard hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I don't know," he said. "The guy seems real, not like what they're saying online." Ellen didn't respond, but her eyes lingered on Jonathan, her earlier certainty unraveling. The cabin was a mix of divided opinions. Some passengers still scrolled through Claire's post, nodding in agreement, while others, influenced by Lily's defense and Jonathan's demeanor, began to question the narrative. Tyler, unwilling to stay silent, opened his phone and began typing a post of his own on a flight with Jonathan Roumie right now. He's being unfairly targeted by a flight attendant for his faith. The man is kind, humble, and doesn't deserve this. The chosen truth. He showed it to Jonathan before posting. "Mind if I share this?" he asked. Jonathan paused, then nodded. "If you feel it's right, go ahead," he said. "Just keep it kind." Tyler hit post, and within minutes, his message began to spread, adding fuel to the growing counter-narrative online. Claire, alerted by a notification, saw Tyler's post and felt a surge of panic. Her smirk vanished as she realized the tide was turning. She stepped out of the galley, her eyes scanning the cabin, landing on Jonathan with renewed hostility. "So now you've got your fans fighting your battles," she said, her voice loud enough to draw attention. "This is exactly what I meant, using your so-called faith to manipulate people." Her accusation reignited the tension, and passengers looked up, some with disapproval, others with curiosity. Jonathan closed his Bible, meeting Claire's gaze. "I didn't ask anyone to defend me," he said calmly. "But people speak up when they see something unjust. Maybe you should ask yourself why they feel the need to." His words, delivered without malice, hit Claire like a quiet rebuke. Mrs. Peterson clapped her hands softly, her eyes gleaming with approval. "Well said," she murmured, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Even Richard, now fully engrossed in the online debate, looked up, his expression conflicted. Sarah, returning from the galley, overheard Claire's outburst and felt a knot in her stomach. She knew her message to the supervisor could have consequences, but she couldn't stand by as Claire's actions escalated. She approached Jonathan's row, offering a glass of water with a small, reassuring smile. "Is everything okay?" "Mr. Roumie," she asked softly, her eyes flickering toward Claire, who was now back in the galley, furiously typing on her phone. "I'm fine, Sarah, thank you," Jonathan replied, his voice warm. "I appreciate your kindness." As Sarah moved on, she caught sight of Claire's phone screen, where she was drafting another post, doubling down on her accusations. "This holy actor has everyone fooled. Don't fall for his act or the chosen fraud." Sarah's heart sank, but she kept her composure, knowing her report to the supervisor was already in motion. She returned to her duties, her mind racing with worry about what might happen when the plane landed. In the cabin, Lily, the young fan, was still typing furiously on her phone, responding to comments under her post. "I've met him in person." She wrote, "He's not fake. He's living what he preaches." Her words resonated with many, and the hashtag, "The Chosen Truth," began to gain ground, challenging Claire's narrative. Passengers nearby, inspired by Lily's passion, started engaging online, some posting their own accounts of the incident, describing Jonathan's calm and Claire's hostility. Ellen, now visibly uncomfortable, turned to Richard. "I might have been too quick to judge," she admitted quietly. "He doesn't seem like the type to fake anything." Richard nodded, his fingers finally moving to type a comment under Claire's post. "I was on this flight. The flight attendant's out of line. This guy's just living his faith." His small act of retraction sent a ripple through the online conversation, further weakening Claire's position. Claire, in the galley, saw the shifting tide and felt a growing sense of dread. Her phone buzzed with a message from a colleague on another flight, warning her your post is causing a stir. Be careful. Management might see this. She ignored the warning, her pride refusing to let her back down. But as she glanced at Jonathan, still reading his Bible with quiet focus, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. What if she was wrong? Jonathan, unaware of Claire's internal struggle, received another text from Michael Carter, seeing the online nonsense. "I'm contacting the airline to clarify your ticket status." "Hang in there," Jonathan typed a quick reply. "Thanks, Michael. I trust this will work out." He slipped his phone back into his pocket, his eyes returning to his Bible. The passage he read spoke of enduring trials with patience, and he felt a sense of peace, knowing he was on the right path. As the plane began its descent toward New York, the cabin lights brightened, signaling the end of the meal service. Sarah moved through the aisle, her professional smile masking her anxiety about the report she'd sent. Claire, now visibly shaken, avoided eye contact with passengers, her earlier bravado replaced by a tense silence. Passengers continued to check their phones, the online battle between the chosen fraud and the chosen truth intensifying. Tyler leaned toward Jonathan again, his voice low. "This isn't over." "Is it?" he asked. Jonathan shook his head slightly, his smile faint but resolute. "Not yet," he said. "But the truth has a way of rising above the noise." His words carried a quiet confidence, and Tyler nodded, sensing something bigger was at play. As the plane descended through the clouds, the cabin remained charged with anticipation. Claire's post had sparked a firestorm, but the growing support for Jonathan hinted at a turning point. Sarah's report to the supervisor loomed like a silent storm, ready to change everything. The truth was fighting its way to the surface, and when it broke through, it would demand everyone, passengers, crew, and Claire herself to face it head-on. The plane descended steadily toward New York, the cabin lights brightening as the first-class passengers prepared for landing. The online storm sparked by Claire Thompson's accusations against Jonathan Roumie raged on, with the chosen fraud and the chosen truth battling for dominance on social media. Jonathan sat calmly in seat 2A, his worn Bible open, the wooden cross around his neck a quiet anchor amidst the chaos. Claire, now visibly rattled, moved stiffly through the cabin, her professional facade crumbling under the weight of her actions. As the tension simmered, Sarah approached Jonathan with a discreet message. Captain Wilson wanted to speak with him in private. But Claire, sensing a threat to her authority, made a desperate move, and a passenger's hidden video loomed as a new spark that could ignite the truth. Sarah, her face a mix of nerves and determination, leaned toward Jonathan, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Roumie, the captain would like a word with you near the galley, if you have a moment," she said, her eyes flickering toward Claire, who was arranging trays with forced precision. Jonathan nodded, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Of course," he replied, his tone calm and gracious. He rose, tucking his Bible into his bag, and followed Sarah toward the front of the cabin. Passengers watched curiously, some still scrolling through their phones, where the online debate continued to escalate. In the galley, Claire caught sight of Jonathan moving toward the front and froze, her hands tightening around a tray. She intercepted Sarah before they reached the galley's privacy curtain. "What's this about?" she demanded, her voice low but sharp. Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting to Jonathan, then back to Claire. "The captain just wants to speak with him," she said carefully, avoiding specifics. Claire's eyes narrowed, her suspicion growing. "You're undermining me, aren't you?" she hissed, stepping closer to Sarah. "I told you to stay out of this." Sarah stood her ground, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm just doing my job, Claire." "You should too." Jonathan, sensing the tension, paused at the edge of the galley. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm, his presence diffusing the confrontation. Claire's face flushed, but she said nothing, turning back to her tray with a curt nod. Sarah gestured for Jonathan to follow, leading him to a small space near the cockpit where Captain Wilson waited, a cup of coffee in hand and a thoughtful expression on his face. "Mr. Roumie, thank you for joining me," Captain Wilson said warmly, extending his hand. "I'm Captain Daniel Wilson. I wanted to address what happened earlier." His tone was professional but sincere, his graying hair and steady demeanor reflecting years of experience. Jonathan shook his hand, smiling faintly. "Please, call me Jonathan," he said. "I appreciate you taking the time." The captain glanced toward the galley, where Claire was still visible, then back to Jonathan. "I owe you an apology," he said. "What happened with our lead flight attendant doesn't reflect our airline's values. There's no policy against religious symbols, and your treatment was unacceptable." Jonathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Captain," he said, "but I don't want anyone to get in trouble. We all have moments where our biases get the better of us." His words carried a grace that made Wilson pause, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "That's generous of you," he said, "but we take these matters seriously. Claire's actions, especially her social media post, are being reviewed." He lowered his voice, leaning closer. "Between you and me, my wife and I are big fans of The Chosen. Your work has brought us closer to our faith. What you did today, staying calm under pressure, it's a powerful example." Jonathan's face softened, touched by the captain's words. "That means a lot," he said. "We pour our hearts into the show to make Jesus feel real and human. Knowing it resonates with you and your family keeps us going." The two men shared a moment of connection, their conversation flowing naturally to the impact of The Chosen and the challenges of living faith in a skeptical world. But their discussion was cut short as Claire appeared at the galley entrance, her face tense. "Captain, I need to speak with you," Claire said, her voice strained but professional. She shot a glance at Jonathan, her eyes flashing with a mix of defiance and fear. Wilson raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Give us a moment, Jonathan," he said, gesturing for him to return to his seat. Jonathan complied, offering a polite smile before heading back to 2A. As he walked down the aisle, he noticed passengers watching him, some with admiration, others with lingering doubt fueled by Claire's online accusations. Back in the cabin, Tyler Brooks leaned toward Jonathan, his phone in hand. "You should see this," he said, showing Jonathan a new wave of comments under Claire's post, many now defending him. People are starting to call her out. "That video Lily posted of you talking to her is going viral." Jonathan glanced at the screen, where Lily's heartfelt defense was gaining thousands of likes. "I'm grateful for her support," he said, "but I hope this doesn't turn into a bigger fight online." Tyler shook his head, grinning. "You're too nice. If I were you, I'd be fighting back." Mrs. Peterson, overhearing, chimed in, her knitting needle still in hand. "He's fighting in his own way," she said, her voice warm but firm. "Not with anger, but with dignity. That's rarer than you think." Jonathan smiled at her, grateful for her insight. "Thank you," he said. "Sometimes The hardest fight is staying true to what you believe without losing compassion. Meanwhile, in the galley, Claire's confrontation with Captain Wilson was heated but hushed. "I was just maintaining order," she insisted, her voice trembling. That man's presence was disruptive. Wilson's expression remained calm, but stern. "Claire, you singled out a passenger for his faith and posted about it online. That's not maintaining order. It's unprofessional." Claire's face paled, her hands clenching. "But people agree with me." "Check the hashtag." Wilson shook his head. "I've seen it. And I've also seen the passenger manifest and the complaints coming in. You need to stop this now." Claire returned to the galley, her composure fraying. She checked her phone, her heart sinking as she saw comments criticizing her actions, some even tagging the airline. Unknown to her, a passenger named Emma, a quiet woman in her 30s who had been seated near the back of first class, had recorded the entire confrontation between Claire and Jonathan on her phone. Emma hesitated, her thumb hovering over the upload button. "This could end her career," she whispered to her seatmate, a college student named Jake. "But it's not right what she did." Jake nodded, his eyes serious. "It's your call, but people deserve to know the truth." Emma's video, if posted, could shift the narrative entirely, exposing Claire's hostility and Jonathan's calm response. For now, she kept it private, but the weight of her decision hung heavy. In the cabin, Lily continued to post updates, her passion for Jonathan and the chosen unwavering. "He's the real deal," she wrote, attaching a photo of Jonathan reading his Bible, his wooden cross visible. Her posts were gaining momentum, and the hashtag The Chosen Truth was closing the gap with Claire's smear campaign. Sarah, moving through the cabin with a drink cart, caught Jonathan's eye and offered a small nod of support. She had received a response from the crew supervisor under review. "Stand by for instructions upon landing." Her heart raced, knowing her report could lead to serious consequences for Claire. She glanced at her colleague, who was now serving passengers with mechanical efficiency, her face a mask of tension. Richard, the passenger who had earlier questioned Jonathan, was now fully engrossed in his phone, reading the growing support for Jonathan online. He turned to Ellen, his voice low. "I think we got this wrong," he said. "The guy's not what Claire's making him out to be." Ellen nodded slowly, her earlier skepticism fading. "He's different," she admitted. "I've never seen someone handle that kind of attack with such grace." Jonathan, unaware of the video or Sarah's report, opened his Bible again, finding comfort in a passage about enduring trials with patience. His phone buzzed with another message from Michael Carter. "Airline's been informed about your ticket. They're looking into Claire's conduct. Stay strong." Jonathan typed a brief reply. "Thank you, Michael. I'm trusting the process." He pocketed his phone, his eyes returning to the page, his calm a stark contrast to the chaos around him. As the plane neared JFK, the cabin crew prepared for landing, their movements brisk. Claire avoided Jonathan's row, her eyes fixed on her tasks, but her hands trembled slightly. Sarah, sensing her colleague's distress, hesitated but said nothing. Her loyalty torn between professionalism and justice, passengers began fastening their seatbelts, but their phones remained active, the online battle showing no signs of slowing. Tyler leaned toward Jonathan one last time, his voice earnest. "You're handling this better than anyone I know," he said, "but this fight's not over." "Is it?" Jonathan shook his head, his smile steady. "Not yet," he said, "but truth has a way of breaking through, even when it's hard to see." His words carried a quiet resolve, and Tyler nodded, sensing the weight of what was to come. As the plane touched down, The cabin stirred with the usual bustle of landing, but the tension lingered, fueled by the online storm, Sarah's report, and Emma's unposted video. The truth was clawing its way to the surface, and when it emerged, it would demand a reckoning not just for Claire, but for everyone who had judged Jonathan before knowing the full story. The wheels of the American Airlines plane screeched against the tarmac at JFK, the first-class cabin buzzing with the rustle of passengers gathering their belongings. The online storm, fueled by Claire Thompson's "The Chosen Fraud" hashtag, continued to rage, but a new wave was rising. Emma, the quiet passenger who had recorded Claire's confrontation with Jonathan Roumie, finally uploaded her video to social media, and within minutes, it exploded online, revealing Claire's hostility and Jonathan's calm resolve. Jonathan sat in seat 2A, his worn Bible tucked away, the wooden cross around his neck glinting faintly as he prepared to disembark. Claire, now pale and shaken, moved through the cabin with mechanical precision, unaware that her world was about to unravel. A text from a sick child, a fan of The Chosen, lit up Jonathan's phone, igniting a fire in him to protect the truth he stood for. As passengers stood to retrieve their luggage, their phones lit up with notifications. Emma's video, captioned, "This is the truth about Jonathan Roumie on flight AA247. The chosen truth showed Claire's biting accusations and Jonathan's measured responses, his wooden cross visible throughout. The clip spread rapidly, amassing thousands of views in minutes. Comments poured in, praising Jonathan's composure and condemning Claire's behavior. "This is what true faith looks like," one user wrote. "That flight attendant should be ashamed," said another. The hashtag, "The Chosen Truth" surged, overtaking Claire's smear campaign. In the galley. Claire's phone buzzed incessantly, her face draining of color as she saw the video. Her post, once dominant, was now drowned out by a flood of support for Jonathan. She gripped the counter, her breath uneven, as Sarah approached, her eyes filled with concern. "Claire, you need to see this," Sarah said softly, showing her the video. Claire's hands trembled as she watched herself on screen, her voice sharp and accusatory, while Jonathan remained a pillar of calm. "This is edited," she muttered, her voice weak. "They're making it look worse than it was." Sarah shook her head, her tone gentle but firm. "It's not edited. Claire, it's what happened. You need to own this." Claire's eyes flashed with defiance, but the weight of the truth was crushing her resolve. She opened her social media app, typing a frantic post, "Don't believe the video, it's staged. That actor planned this to make himself look good. The chosen fraud." She hit send, clinging to her narrative, but the comments were merciless, calling out her denial. Passengers in the cabin, now openly discussing the video, glanced at Claire with disapproval. Ellen Harper, who had once mocked Jonathan, turned to Richard, her voice low. "I was wrong about him," she admitted. "That video shows the truth. He didn't deserve any of this." Tyler Brooks, helping Jonathan with his bag, showed him the video on his phone. "This is blowing up," he said, his voice a mix of excitement and concern. "People are rallying behind you." Jonathan watched a few seconds of the clip, his expression thoughtful. "I didn't want it to come to this," he said quietly. "But sometimes, the truth needs to be seen." Tyler nodded, impressed by his restraint. "You're handling this like a saint," he said, half joking. Jonathan smiled faintly. "Not a saint, just someone trying to live what I believe." Mrs. Peterson, gathering her knitting, leaned toward Jonathan. "You've shown more grace than most would," she said, her eyes warm with admiration. "That video is making people think twice about judging others." Jonathan nodded, touched by her words. "Thank you," he said. "I hope it reminds people that faith isn't about perfection, it's about staying true, even when it's hard." As passengers began to disembark, Lily, the young fan, rushed to Jonathan's side, her face alight with excitement. "Your story's everywhere," she said, showing him her phone where the chosen truth was trending. "People are saying you're an inspiration." Jonathan smiled, his eyes kind. "I'm just grateful for your support." "Lily," he said, "it's not about me, it's about the message we're trying to share." Lily beamed. Typing another post, "Jonathan Roumie is the real deal. His faith shines through. The chosen truth." In the galley, Claire's phone buzzed with a message from the airline's crew supervisor. "Report to management upon landing. Your conduct is under investigation." Her stomach dropped, the reality of her actions sinking in. She glanced at Jonathan, now standing to leave, and felt a pang of regret she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Sarah, noticing her distress, touched her arm. "You can still make this right," she said softly. Claire pulled away, her face hardening. "I was just doing my job," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. As Jonathan reached for his bag, his phone vibrated with a new message. It was from a mother named Rachel, whose son, Tommy, a 7-year-old battling leukemia, was a fan of The Chosen. "Tommy watches your show every day in the hospital." The message read, "He says you make Jesus feel real. He's praying for you after hearing about the flight. Please keep being his hero." Jonathan's throat tightened, his eyes lingering on the words. The message grounded him, reminding him why he endured the scrutiny. He typed a quick reply, "Tell Tommy he's my hero. I'll pray for him too." The weight of Tommy's message fueled a resolve in Jonathan. He turned to Tyler, who was still by his side. "I need to protect what The Chosen stands for," he said, his voice steady but firm. "Not for me, but for people like Tommy who find hope in it." Tyler nodded, sensing the depth of his conviction. "What's your plan?" he asked. Jonathan's eyes flickered with determination. "I'll speak at the charity event tonight," he said. "Not to fight back, but to share what really matters: love, faith, and truth." As passengers filed off the plane, the cabin crew prepared for the next flight. Claire moved through her tasks, her movements robotic, her mind racing with the consequences of her actions. The video had shifted public perception, and her post was now buried under a wave of support for Jonathan. Sarah, watching her colleagues struggle, felt a mix of sympathy and frustration. She knew her report to management would likely lead to disciplinary action, but she believed it was the right thing to do. Richard, who had earlier doubted Jonathan, stepped into the aisle, his expression sheepish. "Hey, man," he said, approaching Jonathan. "I shouldn't have brought up that online stuff. I was wrong." Jonathan shook his head, his smile warm. "No hard feelings," he said. "We all make snap judgments sometimes. It's what we do after that counts." Richard nodded, relieved, and joined the line to disembark, his phone now silent as he resisted engaging further online. Ellen, watching the exchange, approached Jonathan hesitantly. "I owe you an apology too," she said, her voice low. "I believed the worst without knowing you." That video opened my eyes. Jonathan's smile was kind. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "It's never too late to see things differently." Ellen nodded, her face softening as she walked away, a newfound respect in her eyes. Outside the plane, passengers gathered at the gate, many still glued to their phones, sharing and commenting on Emma's video. Lily continued to post updates, her passion for Jonathan unwavering. "He's not just an actor, he's a living example of faith," she wrote, her words resonating with thousands. The online tide was turning decisively in Jonathan's favor, but Claire's accusations lingered, a stubborn stain on his reputation. Claire, now alone in the galley as the cabin emptied, stared at her phone, the supervisor's message burning in her mind. She felt the walls closing in, her pride warring with the growing realization of her mistake. She glanced at Jonathan, who was among the last to leave, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to her turmoil. For a moment, she considered approaching him, but her resolve faltered, and she turned away, her heart heavy with unacknowledged regret. Jonathan stepped off the plane, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, the wooden cross still visible against his blazer. Tyler walked beside him, offering to carry his bag. "You've got a fight ahead with that online mess," Tyler said, his voice supportive. "But you've got a lot of people rooting for you." Jonathan nodded, his eyes focused ahead. "It's not about the fight," he said. "It's about the message. I need to make sure it's heard." As they reached the terminal, Jonathan's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Michael Carter, the airline's investigating Claire. "I've got your back for the charity event. Let's make it count." Jonathan smiled, his resolve strengthening. The charity event loomed as his chance to set the record straight, not with anger, but with the truth of his faith. The storm was far from over, and the stage was set for a moment that would resonate far beyond the flight, challenging everyone to confront the power of truth and grace. The lights of the New York charity event glowed warmly, illuminating a packed auditorium buzzing with anticipation. Jonathan Roumie stood backstage, his worn Bible tucked under his arm, the wooden cross around his neck a quiet reminder of the storm he'd faced on flight AA-247. The viral video exposing Claire Thompson's hostility had shifted the online narrative, with the chosen truth now dominating social media, but whispers of her accusations lingered. As Jonathan prepared to speak, Claire, miles away, sat alone in her hotel room. Her phone buzzing with a message from American Airlines, her conduct was under formal investigation. Jonathan's upcoming speech would not only address the day's events, but set a stage for a reckoning that would challenge hearts far beyond the auditorium. Jonathan stepped onto the stage, greeted by a wave of applause from the crowd, many of whom were fans of The Chosen. The event, aimed at raising funds for underprivileged children, carried a weight of purpose that steadied his nerves. He adjusted the microphone, his navy blazer slightly creased from the flight, and began. "Thank you all for being here," he said, his voice warm and steady. "Tonight isn't about me, it's about the kids we're helping and the hope we can give them. But I want to share a story from today that's reminded me why hope matters." The audience leaned in, sensing the gravity in his tone. Jonathan took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the crowd. "On my flight here, I was challenged for wearing this," he said, touching the wooden cross lightly. "Someone assumed my faith was a performance, a way to seek attention. They questioned my presence in a place they thought I didn't belong." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I could have responded with anger, but I chose to respond with respect not because it's easy, but because it's what faith calls us to do." The room was silent, captivated by his sincerity. Jonathan continued, his voice growing stronger. "Faith isn't about proving you're right, it's about living with love, even when you're misunderstood. It's about forgiving those who judge you, because we all carry wounds that shape how we see others." He smiled faintly, his eyes warm. "Today, I was reminded that the greatest act of faith is to show grace under pressure, to choose kindness when it's easier to fight back." The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping tears from their eyes. Phones lit up as attendees recorded snippets of the speech, posting them online with captions like, "Jonathan Roumie speaks truth," and "This is what faith looks like." The video clips spread rapidly, amplifying the message of forgiveness and respect. News outlets, already following the flight drama, picked up the speech, with headlines praising Jonathan's grace and questioning Claire's actions. The hashtag, "The Chosen Truth," soared, drowning out the remnants of "The Chosen Fraud." Back in her hotel room, Claire sat on the edge of her bed, her phone screen glowing with notifications. The airline's message was stark: report to headquarters tomorrow for a disciplinary hearing regarding your conduct on flight AA247. Her hand shook as she scrolled through social media, where Jonathan's speech was trending. She watched a clip, her stomach twisting as his words about forgiveness echoed in her mind. The comments were brutal, calling her out for her hostility, some even demanding her dismissal. "This isn't fair," she muttered, but the weight of her actions pressed harder. She opened her latest post, where she'd accused Jonathan of staging the incident, and saw it buried under a flood of criticism. Across the city, Tyler Brooks, who had flown in for a business meeting, watched Jonathan's speech on a live stream from his hotel. He texted Jonathan, "You nailed it. That speech is going viral. You're changing hearts out there." Jonathan, backstage after his speech, read the message and smiled. "Thanks." "Tyler," he replied, "it's not about me. It's about the message." He slipped his phone into his pocket, his thoughts turning to Tommy, the sick child whose message had grounded him earlier. He knew this moment was for people like Tommy, who found hope in the truth he carried. At the event, Lily, the young fan from the flight, was in the audience, her eyes shining with pride. She posted a clip of Jonathan's speech, writing, "This is why I stood up for him. He lives what he preaches." The chosen truth. Her post gained thousands of likes, further fueling the online support. Mrs. Peterson, who had returned to her New York home, watched the speech on her tablet, her knitting forgotten. "That young man's got a gift," she said to her husband, who nodded in agreement. "He's teaching us all something tonight." Richard, another passenger from the flight, was at a bar with colleagues, watching the speech on a news channel. He shook his head, impressed. "I called him out on that plane. He admitted to a friend. But he's the real deal. I owe him an apology." He pulled out his phone. "Drafting a comment under one of Jonathan's speech clips, I was wrong to doubt you. Your words tonight hit home." His small gesture added to the growing wave of support as more passengers from the flight chimed in online, sharing their accounts of Jonathan's grace. Claire, alone in her room, felt the walls closing in. The airline's investigation loomed, and the public backlash was relentless. She watched another clip of Jonathan's speech, where he spoke of forgiving those who judge. "How can he be so calm?" she whispered, her voice breaking. She thought of her own past years of resentment toward religion, rooted in a childhood where faith was used to control rather than uplift. Jonathan's words stirred something deep, but her pride held her back. She typed a draft for another post, defending herself, but her fingers hesitated, and she deleted it, unable to find the words. Back at the event, Jonathan mingled with attendees, his humility evident as he thanked them for their support. A reporter approached, asking about the flight incident. "I don't want to focus on the conflict," Jonathan said, his voice steady. "I want to focus on what we can learn how to treat each other with respect, even when we disagree." His response, broadcast live, resonated with viewers, further cementing his message. The crowd around him grew, many sharing how the chosen had touched their lives, some even mentioning the flight video and their admiration for his composure. Sarah, who had stayed late at JFK to file a detailed report with the airline, watched the speech on her phone during a break. Her heart lifted at Jonathan's words. but she felt a pang of worry for Claire. She texted her colleague, "You okay? I saw the speech. Maybe it's time to talk to him." Claire didn't respond, her silence a sign of her inner turmoil. Sarah sighed, knowing the investigation would likely lead to serious consequences, but hoping Claire would find a way to make amends. Emma, the passenger who had recorded the video, was also at the event, having attended as a supporter of the charity. She approached Jonathan during a quiet moment, her voice nervous. "I'm the one who posted the video," she confessed. "I hope it didn't cause more harm than good." Jonathan smiled, his eyes kind. "You did what you thought was right," he said. "The truth needed to be seen." "Thank you." Emma nodded, relieved, her decision validated by his grace. As the event wound down, Jonathan stepped outside for a moment of quiet, the city lights sparkling around him. His phone buzzed with another message from Rachel. "Tommy's mother Tommy saw your speech online. He says you're his hero for standing up with kindness." "Thank you." Jonathan's eyes welled up, the weight of the day settling in. He replied, "Tell Tommy he's my inspiration. I'll keep him in my prayers." The message renewed his resolve, reminding him that his actions were about more than himself. They were about carrying a message of hope. Claire, still in her hotel room, scrolled through the comments under Jonathan's speech, each one a reminder of her misstep. The airline's investigation loomed like a shadow, and her career hung in the balance. She watched another clip, where Jonathan spoke of choosing kindness over anger. "How does he do it?" she muttered, her voice a mix of frustration and awe. She stood, pacing the room, her mind a battleground of pride and regret. The idea of facing Jonathan, of admitting her mistake, felt impossible. But the seed of change was taking root. As Jonathan returned to the event, shaking hands and sharing smiles, the online world continued to buzz with his speech. News outlets ran stories titled, "Actor's Grace Under Fire Inspires Thousands," and Dalek the Chosen Truth became a rallying cry for those moved by his message. Claire's accusations were fading into irrelevance, but her personal reckoning was just beginning. The stage was set for a confrontation not of anger, but of truth and redemption that would challenge her to face the consequences of her actions and the possibility of a new path. The morning sun filtered through the windows of a small New York cafe, casting soft shadows across the wooden tables. Jonathan Roumie sat near the back, sipping black coffee, his worn Bible resting beside him, the wooden cross around his neck catching the light. The whirlwind of the previous day's flight and charity event lingered in his mind, but he was focused on the present, preparing for another day of interviews. Across the city, Claire Thompson, now suspended from her job at American Airlines, paced outside the cafe, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and uncertainty. She had come to confront Jonathan, to defend her actions, but the weight of her mistakes and the viral fallout of her accusations pushed her toward a reckoning she wasn't ready for. As she stepped inside, their unexpected meeting would spark a moment of raw honesty that could change everything. Jonathan looked up as the cafe door chimed, his eyes meeting Claire's as she hesitated in the doorway. Her navy blazer, no longer bearing the airline's insignia, hung loosely on her frame, her face pale and drawn. She approached his table, her steps faltering, and stopped a few feet away. "Mr. Roumie," she said, her voice strained but resolute. "We need to talk." Jonathan set his coffee down, his expression calm but attentive. "Of course." "Claire," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Please, sit." Claire sat, her hands clasped tightly on the table, her eyes avoiding the wooden cross around his neck. The cafe buzzed with quiet conversation, but their corner felt like a world apart. I'm here because I don't think you understand what you've done, she began, her voice low but sharp. Your speech last night. That video from the flight, it's ruined my career. People are calling for my job, saying I'm a bully. I was just doing what I thought was right. Her words carried a mix of defiance and desperation, her eyes finally meeting his, searching for a reaction. Jonathan listened, his gaze steady, his hands resting calmly on his Bible. I'm sorry you're going through this, he said, his voice gentle but firm. But I didn't make that video. And I didn't ask for any of this to happen. I only spoke about what I believe about respect, forgiveness, and living with integrity. Claire's jaw tightened, her fingers digging into her palms. You don't get it, she snapped. You stood there, looking all noble, while I'm the one paying the price. You played the victim, and now I'm the villain. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his eyes softening with compassion. Claire. I don't see you as a villain, he said. I see someone who made a choice based on what you felt at the time. But choices have consequences. And sometimes they lead us to moments like this where we have to face the truth. His words, delivered without judgment, made Claire pause. She opened her mouth to argue, but something in his tone stopped her, stirring a memory she'd buried long ago. Claire took a shaky breath, her voice dropping to a whisper. You talk about truth like it's so simple, she said. I grew up in a house where faith was a weapon. My father used it to control us, to shame us, to make us feel small. When I saw your cross, your Bible, it brought all that back. I thought you were just another person using faith to feel superior. Her eyes glistened, her vulnerability spilling out despite her resistance. I didn't want to hurt you. I couldn't stand seeing it. Jonathan's expression softened further, his heart aching for her pain. Thank you for sharing that, he said quietly. I'm sorry for what you went through. Faith should never be used to hurt. It's meant to heal, to lift up. This cross, he said, touching it briefly, is a reminder of that for me. It's not about being better than anyone. It's about remembering who I'm called to be. Claire stared at the cross, her defenses crumbling as his words sank in. The cafe's hum faded into the background as their conversation deepened. Claire's voice trembled as she continued. I've spent years running from anything that looked like faith, she admitted. When I saw you on that plane, I thought you were just another fraud. But then I watched your speech last night. You talked about forgiveness, about grace, and it hit me. I don't know how to do that. Her voice broke, and she looked away, blinking back tears. Jonathan leaned back, his eyes filled with empathy. Forgiveness isn't about being perfect, he said. It's about letting go of the weight that holds you down. It starts with being honest with yourself, with others. You're here now, talking to me. That's a start. Claire shook her head, her hands trembling. But I've lost everything, she said. My job's on the line, my reputation's destroyed. How do I come back from that? Jonathan paused, choosing his words carefully. You don't have to come back alone, he said. Faith isn't just about believing in something, it's about finding a community, a purpose. The chosen. What we do, it's about showing Jesus as someone who meets people where they are, in their brokenness. Maybe you could give it a chance, see if it speaks to you. He smiled faintly, his voice warm. My grandmother, who gave me this cross, used to say that faith is a journey, not a destination. You're on that journey now, whether you realize it or not. Claire's eyes lingered on the cross, her mind racing. She wanted to argue, to cling to her anger, but Jonathan's sincerity disarmed her. "I don't know where to start," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Jonathan reached into his bag, pulling out a small card with the Chosen logo. "This has information on where to watch the show," he said, sliding it across the table. "No pressure, but it might help you see faith differently. And if you ever want to talk, I'm here." He met her gaze, his eyes conveying a genuine openness that made her chest tighten. Claire took the card, her fingers brushing the logo. She nodded, unable to speak, her emotions a tangled mix of shame and curiosity. The cafe door chimed as a group of customers entered, breaking the moment's intensity. Jonathan glanced at his watch, then back at Claire. "I have an interview soon," he said, standing, "but I'm glad we talked. I'll be praying for you." Claire, his words, simple but heartfelt, left her speechless. She watched as he gathered his Bible and bag, offering a final nod before heading toward the door. As Jonathan stepped into the bustling New York street, his phone buzzed with a message from Tyler Brooks. "Saw your speech online. It's everywhere. You're making waves." Jonathan smiled, typing a quick reply. "Thanks, Tyler. Just trying to share what matters." He slipped his phone into his pocket, his thoughts turning to Tommy, the sick child whose message had anchored him. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing his words at the event had reached beyond the auditorium, touching hearts like Claire's, even if she wasn't ready to admit it. Back in the cafe, Claire sat alone, staring at the card in her hand. The weight of the airline's investigation, the public backlash, and Jonathan's unexpected kindness pressed against her. She opened her phone, where notifications from her now infamous post still lingered, but the tide had turned. Comments praising Jonathan's grace and criticizing her actions dominated, and clips from his speech were shared widely. She hesitated, then opened a streaming app, searching for The Chosen. The first episode appeared, and she hovered over the play button, her heart pounding. She wasn't ready to watch, not yet, but the seed Jonathan had planted was taking root. Across the city, Sarah, still at JFK, received a follow-up from the crew supervisor. "Claire's hearing is tomorrow. Your report was critical." "Thank you." Sarah sighed, conflicted. She wanted justice, but also hoped Claire could find redemption. She texted Claire, "I know you're struggling. I'm here if you need me." Claire didn't respond, her focus still on the card, her mind wrestling with the possibility of change. Lily, the young fan, was at her hotel, posting updates about Jonathan's speech, her enthusiasm unwavering. "He's showing us what faith really means," she wrote, her words resonating with thousands. Mrs. Peterson, back home, shared a clip of the speech with her church group, sparking discussions about forgiveness. Even Richard and Ellen, now following the story online, were moved by Jonathan's message, their initial doubts replaced by respect. As Jonathan walked toward his next interview, the city's energy swirling around him, he felt a quiet strength. The confrontation with Claire had been raw and painful, but it had opened a door to something deeper, a chance for healing, not just for her, but for anyone touched by their story. The truth was spreading, not through anger, but through grace. And the ripple effects were only beginning to unfold, setting the stage for a transformation that would reach far beyond that small cafe. The New York skyline shimmered under the late afternoon sun, its energy pulsing through the crowded streets where Jonathan Roumie walked toward his next interview. His worn Bible was tucked into his bag, the wooden cross around his neck a steady reminder of the turbulent journey that began on flight AA-247. Across the city, Claire Thompson sat in her hotel room, her phone trembling in her hands as she typed a public apology on social media, admitting her mistake in targeting Jonathan. The post, raw and vulnerable, sparked a firestorm of reactions, some supportive, others vicious, plunging her deeper into a personal crisis. As Jonathan learned of her apology, he faced a choice that would ripple far beyond their encounter, testing the true strength of mercy in the face of public judgment. Claire's post, uploaded to the same platform where she had once accused Jonathan, read, "I was wrong to judge Jonathan Roumie on flight AA247. My actions were unprofessional, driven by personal biases. I'm sorry for the harm I caused." The chosen truth. She hesitated before hitting send, her heart pounding with fear of the backlash. When she finally posted, the response was immediate. Some users praised her courage, writing, "It takes guts to admit you're wrong," while others, fueled by the earlier drama, unleashed a torrent of criticism. "You don't get to apologize after trying to ruin him, and too late. Hypocrite." Claire's hands shook as she read the comments, her vulnerability exposed to a merciless online crowd. Jonathan, preparing for his interview in a quiet studio lounge, received a text from Tyler Brooks. Claire just posted an apology. "It's blowing up, but she's getting slammed. Check it out." Jonathan opened his phone, scrolling through Claire's post and the flood of reactions. His expression softened, a mix of compassion and resolve in his eyes. He knew the weight of public scrutiny, having faced it himself, and Claire's apology, though imperfect, was a step toward redemption. He began typing a response, his fingers steady as he crafted a message that would challenge the narrative of vengeance. His post read, "I've seen Claire's apology, and I accept it. We all make mistakes. What matters is the courage to own them. Let's show her the same grace we all need. Faith isn't about perfection. It's about growth. Thank you, Claire, for your honesty." The chosen truth. He hit send, and within minutes, the post gained traction, shared by fans, passengers from the flight, and even media outlets. Comments poured in. "This is what true faith looks like, and Jonathan Roumie is a class act." The hashtag #TheChosenTruth surged again, transforming the conversation from one of division to one of unity. Claire, still in her hotel room, stared at Jonathan's post, her breath catching. The vitriol in her notifications was overwhelming, but his words cut through the noise like a lifeline. Tears welled in her eyes as she read his call for grace, a stark contrast to the anger she'd expected. She opened The Chosen on her streaming app. The episode still paused from the night before when she'd hesitated to watch. This time, she pressed play, the screen lighting up with Jonathan's portrayal of Jesus, his compassion mirroring the kindness he'd shown her in the cafe. For the first time, she saw faith not as a weapon, but as a bridge to healing. Across the city, Sarah, Claire's colleague, was at JFK, finishing her shift when she saw Jonathan's post. She smiled, relieved that her report to the airline had led to this moment, but her heart ached for Claire. She texted her, "Saw your apology," and Jonathan's response, "You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." Claire didn't reply, but Sarah's words, coupled with Jonathan's, stirred a flicker of hope in her. She began typing a response to Jonathan's post. "Thank you for your kindness. I don't deserve it, but I'm learning." She hesitated, then posted, her heart lighter despite the ongoing backlash. Lily, the young fan from the flight, was at a cafe with friends, scrolling through social media when she saw Claire's apology and Jonathan's response. "He's amazing," she said, showing her friends the posts. "He could have let her drown, but he's lifting her up." She added her own comment under Jonathan's post. "This is why I love The Chosen. It's about second chances." The chosen truth. Her words, echoed by thousands, amplified the message of forgiveness, inspiring others to share stories of their own moments of grace. Mrs. Peterson, back at her New York apartment, watched the unfolding drama on her tablet, her knitting forgotten. She shared Jonathan's post with her church group, writing, "This young man's mercy is a lesson for us all." Her husband, reading over her shoulder, nodded. "He's living what he preaches," he said, his voice filled with respect. The couple, moved by the events, decided to donate to the charity Jonathan had spoken at, their faith renewed by his example. Richard, the passenger who had doubted Jonathan, was at a business lunch when he saw the posts. He shook his head, impressed by Jonathan's response. "I misjudged him," he told a colleague, sharing Jonathan's post on his own social media. "This guy's the real deal." His comment, small but sincere, added to the growing wave of support as more passengers from the flight chimed in, their accounts of the incident reinforcing Jonathan's message. Ellen Harper, who had apologized to Jonathan on the plane, was at her hotel, reading the posts with a mix of relief and awe. She commented under Claire's apology, "It takes strength to admit you're wrong. Respect to you and Jonathan for showing us how to move forward." Her words, once skeptical, now carried a newfound humility, reflecting the shift in her perspective. Jonathan, now at the studio for his interview, was unaware of the full impact of his post. The interviewer, a seasoned journalist named Laura, began with a question about the flight. "Your response to that flight attendant's apology is trending," she said, her tone warm but curious. "Why choose forgiveness over calling her out?" Jonathan smiled, his eyes steady. "Because that's what faith is about," he said. "It's not about winning or proving a point. It's about showing people there's a better way. Claire made a mistake, but she's human, just like me. If we don't offer grace, what's the point of believing in it?" The interview, broadcast live, resonated with viewers, clips spreading across social media alongside Jonathan's post. News outlets ran headlines like "Actors Call for Forgiveness Goes Viral," and the narrative shifted decisively toward unity. Claire's apology, though still met with some criticism, began to gain sympathetic comments, with users writing, "Everyone deserves a second chance," and "Jonathan's right grace changes everything." Claire, still in her hotel room, watched the interview on her phone, her heart heavy but stirring with something new. The episode of The Chosen. She'd started played in the background, its portrayal of Jesus' compassion echoing Jonathan's actions. She opened her messages, seeing Sarah's text and dozens of others from colleagues and friends, some offering support, others expressing disappointment. She typed a draft email to the airline, acknowledging her mistakes and requesting a chance to make amends, but didn't send it, her courage wavering. Sarah, at JFK, received a notification about Jonathan's interview and smiled, her faith in doing the right thing reaffirmed. She texted Claire again, "You're stronger than you think. Keep going." Claire read the message, her eyes lingering on Jonathan's post, where his call for grace continued to inspire thousands. She felt a spark of resolve, a desire to rebuild not just her career, but her understanding of faith. Lily, still sharing updates online, posted a photo from the charity event, captioned, "Jonathan Roumie shows us how to forgive. Let's follow his lead." The chosen truth. Her words, echoed by fans worldwide, created a movement of positivity, with people sharing stories of forgiveness in their own lives. Mrs. N. Peterson's church group organized a discussion inspired by Jonathan's actions. While Richard and Ellen continued to engage online, their perspectives transformed. Jonathan, leaving the studio, felt a quiet satisfaction as he read the latest comments under his post. His phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Tommy's mother. Tommy saw your interview. He says you're his hero for being kind. Thank you for giving him hope." Jonathan's heart swelled, his purpose clear. He replied, "Tommy's my hero. Tell him I'm praying for him." As he stepped into the evening, the city lights glowing around him, he knew the story wasn't over. Claire's apology and his response had sparked a movement. But the true test of grace was still to come, promising a transformation that would reach far beyond their words. The Los Angeles skyline glowed under the golden haze of a late summer afternoon, its familiar hum welcoming Jonathan Roumie back home. He stood in his modest apartment, the wooden cross around his neck catching the light as he unpacked his bag, his worn Bible resting on the kitchen table beside a stack of letters from The Chosen fans. Across the country, Claire Thompson, no longer in her airline uniform, sat at a community center in New York, volunteering for a charity event tied to Jonathan's foundation for underprivileged children. The story of their confrontation on flight AA247 had become a beacon of inspiration online, shared by thousands under The Chosen truth. Its message of forgiveness rippling far beyond the plane, as Jonathan prepared for the next season of The Chosen. A letter from a young boy named Tommy would remind him that small acts of grace could spark profound change. Jonathan opened his window, letting the warm breeze fill the room. His old Honda sat in the parking lot below, a testament to his simple life despite the fame of The Chosen. The events of the flight, the viral video, and his speech at the charity event felt like a distant storm, yet their impact lingered. Social media was still abuzz with clips of his words on forgiveness, and the hashtag #TheChosenTruth had inspired countless stories of reconciliation. He sat at the table, flipping through fan letters, each one a reminder of why he poured his heart into his work. Claire, meanwhile, was at the community center, handing out backpacks filled with school supplies to children, her face softer than it had been days ago. After her public apology and Jonathan's gracious response, the airline had suspended her without pay, but allowed her to keep her job pending sensitivity training. The backlash had been harsh, but the support from strangers moved by Jonathan's call for grace had given her strength. She had started watching The Chosen, each episode chipping away at her old resentments about faith. Volunteering for Jonathan's charity was her first step toward rebuilding, a tentative act of redemption. At his apartment, Jonathan's phone buzzed with a message from Tyler Brooks, the businessman from the flight. Back in LA, Tyler wrote, "Your story's still trending. People can't stop talking about how you handled that flight." Jonathan smiled, typing a reply. Back home, "Tyler, thanks for your support, it meant a lot." He set the phone down, his eyes drifting to a new letter on the table, its envelope marked with a child's handwriting. It was from Rachel, Tommy's mother, and his heart skipped as he opened it. "Dear Mr. Roumie," the letter began. "Tommy wanted to write this himself. He's doing better, and he says it's because of you." Enclosed was a drawing of a smiling Jesus, unmistakably inspired by Jonathan's portrayal, with a note in Tommy's scrawl. "Thank you for being kind to the mean lady. You make me believe Jesus loves me." Jonathan's eyes welled up, the weight of the boy's words anchoring him. He penned a reply. "Tommy, you're my hero. Keep shining. Jesus loves you more than you know." He included a small card with The Chosen logo, hoping it would bring a smile. Claire, at the community center, paused to check her phone during a break. A notification caught her eye, a post from Jonathan's foundation, highlighting the event she was volunteering at. "Thanks to our volunteers, we're making a difference for kids like Tommy," it read, with a photo of Claire handing a backpack to a child. She froze, her breath catching as she saw her name tagged with gratitude. Comments poured in. Amazing to see her turn things around, and this is what The chosen truth is about. For the first time in days, Claire felt a spark of hope, a sense that her journey was shifting. Across town, Sarah, Claire's former colleague, was on a break at JFK, scrolling through the same post. She smiled, proud of Claire's step forward, and texted her, "You're doing great out there. Keep it up," Claire replied. A simple, "Thanks, Sarah," her first response in days. She returned to the event, her hands steadier as she helped a young girl pick out a backpack, the child's smile mirroring the warmth she was beginning to feel. Lily, the young fan from the flight, was back in her college dorm, sharing the charity event post with her friends. "This is why Jonathan's my hero," she said, her voice bright with enthusiasm. He didn't just forgive her, he gave her a chance to change. She posted a new update from a flight fight to a charity event. Jonathan, Roumie, and Claire show us what grace can do. The chosen truth. Her words, shared by thousands, kept the story alive, inspiring discussions about redemption across social media. Mrs. Peterson, in her New York apartment, watched a news segment about the charity event, her knitting needles still. "That young man's changing lives," she told her husband, who nodded. "And he's helping that flight attendant find her way," he added, pointing to Claire's photo in the segment. The couple, moved by the story, organized a fundraiser for Jonathan's charity at their church, spreading the message of forgiveness further. Richard and Ellen, the passengers who had doubted Jonathan, followed the story online from their respective homes. Richard shared the charity event post, writing, "I was wrong about Jonathan. His actions speak louder than words." Ellen, inspired, donated to the charity, commenting, "This story taught me to look beyond first impressions." The chosen truth. Their small acts of support added to the growing wave of positivity, as the flight's legacy became a testament to grace. Jonathan, preparing for a script reading for The Chosen's new season, received a call from Michael Carter, the friend who had booked his first-class ticket. "You've turned a mess into a miracle," Michael said, his voice warm. "The charity's getting record donations, and Claire's involvement is inspiring people." Jonathan smiled, his heart full. "It's not me, Michael," he said. "It's what happens when we choose love over hate." He hung up, his thoughts returning to Tommy's letter, a reminder that every step of this journey was for those who found hope in his work. Claire, finishing her shift at the community center, lingered as the children left, their laughter echoing in her ears. She opened The Chosen on her phone, watching another episode, the portrayal of Jesus' compassion stirring something deep within her. She drafted an email to the airline, acknowledging her mistakes and committing to change, then sent it, her heart lighter. A message from Jonathan's foundation arrived, inviting her to join another event. She accepted, a small smile breaking through as she realized she was no longer running from faith, but stepping toward it. As the sun set over Los Angeles, Jonathan stood on his balcony, the city sprawling below. His phone buzzed with a final message from Rachel Tommy's improving, "And he says it's because Jesus sent you. Thank you." Jonathan closed his eyes, the wooden cross warm against his chest, and whispered a prayer for Tommy, Claire, and all those touched by the story. The flight, once a battleground of conflict, had become a beacon of hope, its ripples reaching far beyond the skies. Claire, back in New York, walked home under the city lights, the weight of her past lifting with each step. She wasn't fully healed, but she was on a path, guided by the grace she'd once rejected. The story of Flight AA247, shared by thousands, had become a movement, reminding the world that a single act of kindness could spark change. Jonathan, Claire, and those they touched were proof that faith, lived authentically, could transform even the deepest wounds into stories of redemption. As Jonathan returned to his script, the words of his grandmother echoed, "Faith is a journey, not a destination." He smiled, knowing this journey was far from over, each step a chance to shine a light. The world watched, inspired, as the story of one flight became a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the courage to change. Thank you for following this story. If it moved you, please like, share, and comment below. Tell us how grace has touched your life. Let's keep spreading the message of the chosen truth.